Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to move these out of the way real quick. I was watching that video and didn't come up here and move them. I'm so sorry. You guys doing all right today?
Yeah.
So this morning, I kind of want to give a little bit of a cultural, sociological kind of sermon here, if you don't mind. Is that all right? Yeah. We're going to look at the Bible, and we're going to look at Matthew 11:28 through 30, and I want to get us into what it means historically, contemporaneously with Jesus, and today for us. Okay, because there are some heavy implications here for us, and the implications are going to last us for generations to come. Okay, so over the past few weeks, we've been talking about what it means to be a fully devoted follower of Christ. And we started off by creating a foundation in which we come before God humbly, we pray, we seek His face, we turn from our wrongdoings, and we live anew in Him. Okay. We then talked about what it means to have the presence of God in and through us, living as we go about every moment of our lives. We talked about what it means to be a passionate, spirit-filled believer that has the presence of God resting on them and working through them as we interact with those around us. We've talked about how it is very practical for us to actually do those things. And we watched a little video and it said, "You can do it," right? And we echoed that in response a few times, that we can do these. We can live in response to the Spirit in our life. This morning, we're going to take all of that and we're going to carry it to the next level. And we're going to begin to look at what it means to actually establish within us a perspective of purposeful living, moving, and having our being in Jesus Christ. And I want us to understand just how easy that actually is. Because we have this understanding that it's hard to do the things of God. And I want us to know, right where you're seated, how easy it is for us to accomplish the tasks that Jesus has us to do. Will you guys join me in reading Matthew 11:28 through 30. And Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, this morning I want to thank you for the mighty blessing of Norview Baptist Church. Lord, I want to thank you for providing spiritually, financially, Lord, numerically, and historically for our church. We thank you for a period of rest. Now, Lord, now we ask that you blow the doors off this building. That people will come here eager to hear from you and ready to have their heart, souls, mind, and strength burdened to see more of you. Lord, help those of us gathered here today to lift up your yoke, to find greater blessings for our church here at Five Points. And we give this church to you. all God's people said?
Amen.
Now, I just want you to know that I broke this passage into 3 parts. And the first one is, come to Jesus. That's the first thing Jesus tells us to do. He says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. First thing he says is for us to come to him. And we talked about that back on week 1. We talked about coming before him in prayer, humbling ourselves, seeking his face, and turning from our wrongdoings. The first step in that is admitting that we do things that are wrong. And I don't know about you, but I've said multiple times from here that I am a wretched human being. And I do things wrong all the time. Now, I know that you guys are sitting there and you're like, no, you've always got a smile. Well, that's not true. That's not true. In fact, yesterday, as we're driving to Morgan State and the AC went out in our car, we have this little trick that we learned from the Fonz. That you pound it and it's going to work again, right? And that has always worked. Until yesterday, as I'm traveling to Morgan State on a 5-hour trip with a 6'7" senior and a 6'2" senior, both offensive linemen, me big enough to be an offensive lineman, sweating like dogs. And I pound on the dash because that's what works. And it doesn't work. And so we pound and we pound and then Ken pounds and pounds, and then I pound and pound, and one miserrant strike, and out goes the radio dash. So now we have no visual on our radio, and I want you to know that I did very well in that moment of high frustration. Did I not? I did very well. Internally, I wanted to rip the dashboard apart and get that AC working. I'm just being honest with you. I told you, I will always be honest with you. I was really frustrated because I sweat anyway. Yet, in that moment, I had to admit that I don't have power over I don't have power in this instant over the AC. Normally I have power over the AC. I just turn the knob and it works, right? No, I don't have power over the AC. It's not within my realm of influence, nor is it in my abilities to fix. But pounding on it did work. So I tell you that because I have to admit that there are things that I do that are wrong. There are things that I do that cause reactionary problems. There are things that I do that enhance the issues. And I want you to know that whether you want to admit it to yourself right now or not, there are things that you do in your life that hinder your relationship with God and with others. And as we hinder our relationship with God and with others, the first thing we must do is admit that we do things that separate us from God. We have to admit it. We have to admit it to ourselves, and we have to admit it to God. So as we look at admitting that we need to come to Jesus, we also have to begin to believe. We've got to begin to believe that after Jesus came to this earth and did some really awesome things, right? We could list all kinds of miracles that Jesus did. In fact, we've got 4 books filled with miracles of Jesus. We have to believe that the miracle that is most influential in our lives is the fact that a person who had never slammed the dashboard of his car in frustration because it didn't work, or had never cursed someone out as they sped past them after tailgating them for a while, or never, yelled at their spouse in anger, or punched someone in a fight, or got totally wasted on whatever, what we find is we have to begin to believe that this person that had never done anything wrong to separate himself from God and from others came to this earth for us and sacrificed himself on the cross for all the things that we do, for all the things that I do. And in that, I have to believe that Jesus not only died on the cross for my wrongdoings, but that he was buried and 3 days later rose from the grave. That in the midst of this dead, lifeless body, there wasn't a knockout potion that he was given while on the cross. There wasn't some sort of conspiracy behind the disciples stealing his body. There was nothing like that going on. What there was a dead guy in a tomb that everyone had put their hopes and dreams on. And all of a sudden, he rose to life. And he exited the tomb. And he was then visibly seen by hundreds, thousands of people at a time. And I want you to know that is the greatest miracle of all Jesus ever performed. And he rose to life so that we could believe in him, so that we could have the forgiveness of our hindrances, the forgiveness of our wrongdoings, the forgiveness of what so many people call sin. And then we can be free. We can have newness of life. But we have to confess. We have to confess that Jesus Christ did these things for us. We have to confess that Jesus is the Savior of me. That Jesus is the one and only person that can do those things. See, during this time frame, historically, you had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the rabbis. Those were the religious leaders of the day. And those religious leaders were gathered around Jesus, along with his disciples and the 70 plus other people that were traveling with him. And they were all together around Jesus. And all of a sudden, Jesus makes this claim. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, all you who are tired, all you who want to just roll over and smack that snooze button and say, I'm going to Bedside Baptist this morning." We want that time to be separated. We want that time where instead of hitting the snooze, we turn it off, we get up. We want it to be renewed because we're to come to Jesus tired and weary. So all these Sadducees and Pharisees and rabbis around, along with Jesus and his followers, are there, and Jesus is going to make this claim. He says, "Come to me who are weary and tired and weak." He says, "I will give you rest." And they're all like, "What? How can you do that?" Because they don't fully believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And so Jesus then says, "Take my yoke upon you." Now, to us, we think about, the picture's gone, but we think about oxen, right? When we think about a yoke, we think about oxen or donkeys, and it's this wooden burden that you place on the shoulders of the donkey or the oxen, and that is used to then pull the plow behind them to prepare the fields. Remember we talked about preparing fields? We talked about how we have to till the ground. We've got to get that ground ready to take on the seeds of love. We've got to get that ground ready to take on this newfound life. And so here we see Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you." And as a farming reference, the farmers are like, oh, okay, I know what that means. You know, the burden he's going to help us carry and lift our weight. I want you to realize, though, this has a completely different connotation to the rabbis and the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So this is where we're going to get into a little historical lesson here. The rabbis and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they take this idea of yoke and they gather with them all the Old Testament laws. How many Old Testament laws are there? Can anyone tell me? There's a lot. Just shout it out. What do you think? 614. 614. I don't know that I can count that high. I know I could, but I don't want to because that's a lot. I don't want to count that. I don't have time to count that high. Anybody want to just sit here and count to 614? I don't. Mark, I appreciate that. But see, Jesus comes before them and he says, take my yoke upon you. And the Pharisees, Sadducees, and rabbis are like, he just declared himself to be a rabbi over this people gathered here. And he declared himself to be a rabbi, and he's going to say, take my rules upon yourself, because my rules are easier and lighter than all these other guys around us. Can I get some volunteers? Can I get some volunteers? Uncle Leroy. Okay. Jerry, would you stand up for us? Yes, sir. Jerry. All right, Mindy. Well, that's breaking some rules, but we'll go with it. Okay. All right, Frank. All right. Anyone else? Okay, so these guys are Sadducees, Pharisees, rabbis, and they have a yoke of burden. Okay, so Jerry, will you call out 3 people to stand up? Sure. All right, so Jerry, the 3 of you standing, you are Jerry's followers. You're Jerry's disciples. You're the ones that Jerry says what goes, and you follow and obey what Jerry says. And Jerry, who has a yoke that he's placed on you, that yoke is 614 Old Testament laws. You got to follow all of them. So, I'm sorry, but Miss D and Sandy, you guys are going to have to grow your hair out longer because short hair is not allowed. Okay? And, I'm sorry, was it Steve? Steve and Jerry, you're going to have to grow out the hair that goes around your ears because you're not allowed to shave it close to your head or else you're in sin. I just want you to know that. That's part of the 614. Okay? Mindy, call out 3 people.
Uncle Obi, Karen, and I don't know your name. Yes, you? Yes, and Miss Vera.
All right, so.
Me? Yes.
All right, so. Obi, Evelyn, and Miss Vera, and Mindy. You guys are Mindy's disciples. Mindy has for you 300 laws that you must follow. Okay? Now, Obi is right on because he's got the longer hair around his ears. So he's good to go there. Okay? He's good to go there. But again, ladies, a little bit longer preferably. But here's another catch. How many of you guys like bacon? How many of you guys like sausage? How many of you guys like to watch football? See, here's the problem. they play with pigskin, or you're eating pigskin. My mother likes pork rinds. I literally almost threw up at the kitchen table when I ate them and she was here visiting. You can't eat any of that or play or watch football because you're manipulating the dead flesh of a pig. So I'm sorry, you guys are out of any kind of fun that we might have on a Sunday afternoon here, where we eat pork rinds and watch football. Because that sounds like fun to me, other than the pork rinds. Okay? Kevin, pick 3 people for us real quick.
Jessica. Bobby. Nikita.
Okay? So now we've got Kevin's followers, his disciples. You've only got to follow 150 laws of the Old Testament. Okay? You only have to follow 150. But for you guys, you can't drink milk. You can't drink the milk of a cow or any other animal because that's against the rules. Now, I don't know about you, but there's a reason that myself and Kenan and our boys have grown so big. We like milk. I grew up in Wisconsin. We drink milk. We eat cheese. It's what we do. Okay? So, you guys aren't allowed to have any milk. Got it? Frank, pick 3 real quick.
Go all the way to the back. Call Don and Bill.
All right. You fellas got it easy.
See?
You only have to obey the top 10. What are, can you 4 guys tell me one of the top 10 rules of the Old Testament? They're also known as the 10 Commandments. Okay, what else? Shall not steal. Okay, what else? Commit adultery. Okay, what else? Do not kill. That's kind of an easy one. Kind of. Now, see, here's the thing. I noticed none of you said do not covet. See, covet is probably the one of the top 10 that is the easiest to break. Because coveting almost exclusively includes all the previous and causes us, in our minds, to know that whatever someone else has is off limits to us. That automatic desire, when I see Durans, I watch. That desire that creeps up in me and be like, you know what? I could really sell this to Melinda and show her what a blessing it would be for my ministry. See that's coveting. See, right now we've gone from the full measure of all the law down to the top 10, and they're all super easy for us all to break consistently. You may be seated. Thank you so much. So you've got all these 614 laws, and Jesus comes in and he says, hey, listen, I want you to take my yoke upon you. I want you to take all these other guys' laws and throw it all away. Jesus comes in to create a countercultural experience for all the people that are gathered there following him. And Jesus says, take all these laws and chuck them. I want to give you rest. I want to give you a burden that is light and easy to carry. And I want you to know that that's actually what Jesus does. See, we can take the best of history. We can take the best of modernism. We can take the best of postmodernism. We can take the best of the historical Jesus that we understand. We can take the best out of the greatest generation that is sitting here in our midst. We can take the best out of the boomers. We can take the best, if there is anything best, from me, the Gen X generation. We can take the best from the millennials. We could take the best from all of our generations and bring it together to create something that is postmodern. Something that is so revolutionary that it changes the way 5 Points operates. Because we now have influence over this area socially, culturally, spiritually. Because we are dedicated to serving this community with everything that we are. And I want you to know that that is my passion. That is the heart that God has given me for this church and this community. To infuse the secular with the sacred. To develop a ministry that opens with open boundaries and a willingness to create rather than copy. To fulfill the work of the gospel through any means necessary for the glory of God. Jesus wants us to take his yoke upon us because it is light and it is easy. And for the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about what that yoke is, how it looks in our life here in 5 Points to impact this community. And I want you to know, I'd love to see you guys here. This morning, I know we've taken some extra time. See, for some reason on my clock here, it says 10:02. So I got plenty of time. But there's a clock in back that tells me otherwise. This morning, I want you to know that Jesus has great things in store for us. And this morning, as we bow in prayer, Jesus wants us to realize that his yoke will guide and shape our life forevermore. Father, this morning, allow our heart, soul, mind, and strength to be burdened by our hindrances. Draw us ever closer to you as we admit that we have done wrong to you and to others. As we believe that you have died on the cross for our wrongdoings. And as we confess our belief to you and others, Father, we ask that you let your Spirit move. This morning, if you'd like to know more about admitting, believing, and confessing, would you come forward? This morning, if you would like to know more about what it means to take Jesus' yoke upon you, would you meet me here at the altar? This morning, if you're seeking rest for your soul, would you join me? Would you come?